Welcome back to the Road Home from Wrestling interview. My name's Andy. I'm coming to you live to tape, and it's a great day for a lot of reasons. It's Christmas. That's first of all. And second of all, we got a gift for all of you, and that is the triumphant return of Lord Crewe. What's up, Lord Crewe?
Not much, man. Just sitting around enjoying some coffee in my Road Home from Wrestling coffee mug.
How did you get that? Those are hard to find.
You know, some pleasant people blessed me with this about a year or two ago. Surprised me at a show with it because they know that I'm an avid coffee drinker. So
Yeah, maybe that's what Lord Brew actually refers to.
yeah,
It's
brewing
not.
coffee. Yeah, there you go.
That makes a lot more sense,
That
actually.
makes way more sense. Because now I guess I've had since I got the glasses, a lot of people have told me I look like a barista. So
I like it. I like it.
I hate it.
Well, man, you've had a hell of a 2019, and we're going to get into some of the ups and downs of 2019. But I'm wondering, today is Christmas, so Merry Christmas to you and Happy
Merry
Holidays.
Christmas to you.
Well, do you have any holiday traditions or anything? I mean, what is your Christmas usually like?
Typically I spend my Christmases with family, of course. We usually do like a breakfast with the immediate family. Like my niece comes over, we give her gifts and spoil the crap out of her. And then in the evening we usually do like a bigger family dinner at my aunt's house. But every Christmas I have to watch Christmas Vacation. Like that is on my has to happen list every year. I don't care if it happens at dinner, if it happens in the in-between time, but I have to sit down and watch Christmas Vacation.
What's your favorite part of that movie?
My favorite part is when either the squirrel scene, when the squirrel's in the tree, or the part where he gets the Jelly of the Month Club subscription and he just goes on that huge tangent and starts like cussing out his boss in front of his family. That's good. I like that.
I'm a big fan of the neighbors in that movie. They're like the yuppie neighbors
in
Seinfeld. Right. And I always wondered, like, they have this really fancy stereo setup in their home, and it looks space age, and I don't recognize those like rack mounted systems that they have. It always made me wonder, like, I wonder what that is. They have some kind of magic new way to play music, and of course Clark destroys all that, right? Well, it sounds like you're going to have a good Christmas as usual, hanging out with fam and stuff like that. That's always great. Are there any wrestling Christmas traditions that you have?
It looks like there's a new one that just started this year. I just did for Rockstar Pro's pay-per-view, I had a triple threat with Cole Radrick and Madman Fulton, and I was Lord Christmas. So I dressed up like kind of like a heavy metal Santa Claus, and it was really fun. We did a whole thing where I told Fulton all he got for Christmas was a lump of coal, and then I threw Cole Radrick at him.
That's very clever. And nobody, let me tell you something. If Cole Radrick shows up in your stocking for Christmas, you have been a very bad boy. I'll tell you that much.
Very bad.
Nobody wants that. So, and that picture will be the episode art for this episode because, that picture is tremendous. And, yeah, of course, a match went along with it, but it's almost like, who cares? Because that picture is so awesome.
I will ask you how many people have asked if they can sit on my lap and tell me what they and I won't confirm nor deny if they've been Ralph and Justin.
Well, later on, we actually, heard from Indiana correspondent Justin and Ralph as well. So Merry Christmas to them. They've sent a few questions along, but we'll get to those a little later.
Those are my boys. So
yeah,
I'll be happy to answer questions from my boys.
Well, okay, so how do you feel? Okay, 2019's over now, or about.
Well, it's pretty close, yeah.
It's pretty damn close. And of course, you got some dates coming up in January and stuff like that. But how do you feel about 2019 overall? Because to me, if I were you, I'd be pretty happy about the progression that you've made in 2019 as far as getting your name out there. And I'd be real happy about some of the performances that you had. How do you feel deep down about how this year went?
So this year I actually did something different that I've never done before. I bought like a planner So I have actually been keeping track of how many matches I've had, who they've been with, and where they've been. And when I look back on that, as of right now, of course, the year's not over yet, but I have wrestled 140 matches in 2019. And I don't know how that relates to the years prior to this, but I feel like this was my busiest year for sure. And I really feel like this year I've grown a lot as a wrestler in and out of the ring. Like, I feel like I've learned a lot of things. I feel more confident in what I'm doing. Um, I've got to go a few new places and, you know, get matches with some people who I've wanted to have matches with. And I feel like I've, again, this isn't me tooting my own horn, but I think I've put on the best matches that I've had so far in my career this last year. And I think I also did a really good job of getting my name out, whether it be on social media or, I've done a lot of traveling this year, going to shows with people, like just jumping in cars and going to places that I want to be, just haven't quite been given the opportunity yet. So hopefully sometime in 2020, I'll get to start popping up at some new places.
Do you ever get frustrated with I mean, everyone calls it the grind or whatever, but what I'm really specifically talking about is the fact that a lot of times, I mean, for most people, and this is in all walks of life, wrestling, it kind of seems magnified when you're the wrestler, though, is that do you ever get frustrated with the fact that it's slow going as far as like, you don't just suddenly blow up in wrestling. I mean, it does happen, but it's like one or two people a year, how do you feel about that? And are you patient, or is this something that gets under your skin sometimes?
I'd be lying if I said I didn't. Like, if it didn't get under my skin sometimes. Just because like it's one of those things where wrestling is something that we all love so much and we all want to be great at it. You know what I mean? Like, we don't get into this, and I mean, I guess there are some people who do, but the vast majority of wrestlers don't start wrestling to just be okay at it. You know what I mean? Like, everyone wants to be the best performer they can be. Everyone wants to put on the best matches that they can. And at the end of the day, we all want to make it to somewhere we can make this a living, because if we don't, then what are we even putting our bodies through this for? Like, so yeah, there is definitely some frustration when it comes to like, like, damn, I just wish the time, I wish it would happen, because I'd like to see some payoff for the stuff that I put my body through. But I know that I'm pretty positive everyone goes through that. So I don't think it's wrong of me to say that. But with like, I look at guys like Larry D. Larry's been at this for so long and he's so good and he's been so many places and he finally just got his due after 16 years or whatever it was. And I was fortunate to be in the building the night that, Scott offered Larry a contract, and it brought tears to my eyes just because Larry's such an important person to me in my journey with wrestling. And aside from wrestling, Larry's become just a really good personal friend of mine. And to see all of his hard work finally pay off, and him to have that moment, it reminded me that that sometimes everyone has their own timeline. Like, it doesn't always happen for people the way it happened for like Ace Austin. I mean, that dude is just a freak. He's he's one of those cases where, or like an MJF, guys who've only been in for a couple years but are just so damn good that people can't deny him. So like, everyone has their own journey, everyone has their own timeline of how things need to go. So I try to not get frustrated, but sometimes, I just get caught up in my passion, and my passion causes me to get frustrated. So I know that was a really long answer to that question. I apologize. But
Hey, those are the best kinds of answers. And, of course, shout out the legendary Larry D. It's interesting how you mentioned his journey has been 15, 16 years or whatever in pro wrestling. And that's just as a wrestler. Before that, he was a fan, I'm sure, and,
right.
went to shows and things like that. So that journey is lifetime journey.
Yeah.
And, but the journey to get signed by Impact began when he started showing up at Rockstar almost 3 years ago. So, there's all these kinds of steps in the journey, and what's there's this kind of phrase that people throw out all the time: stop and smell the roses. And it's like the Western version of the Eastern philosophy, that it's all about the journey and the end doesn't matter, because if we're only focused on the end, then what are we doing the rest of our lives? So
Right.
I think, looking at a guy like Larry D, obviously everyone's ecstatic for him because they know him, and he's touched so many lives in wrestling. So that kind of leads me to a question, like what kind of effect do you think you've had over the past year, for example? And do you think you've touched some lives in wrestling over this journey of the past year?
The only thing that I could really say to that is that I hope so, because there's nothing more fulfilling than when a little kid comes up to you at a show and tells you that you're their favorite, or like when people come up and ask you to sign stuff, when because I'm just a dude. I do this because I love it, and yes, I have goals of something greater, but as of right now, man, I still got to work a job. I still do all the same stuff that I've always done. And to the fact that people still kind of look at you with that set of eyes, that that you are someone important to them, like that's cool, and I feel like, I don't know, like I down at PTW, there's a little boy named Charlie that comes to a lot of shows, and there was a time where he was in the hospital because he wasn't eating or drinking and was like very dehydrated, and he just wasn't cooperating to get himself better. And the woman who cares for him, she came up to me at intermission and she asked me, she said, "Hey, can you make a quick video for Charlie to try to convince him to get better and stuff?" And like, just the fact that like it coming from me could have been what made or broke it. That was really cool. Like, knowing that that little kid looks up to me enough to where, like, okay, if I hear it from this guy, then I better do it. Like, that's cool. And then as far as like other wrestlers, like a lot of the younger guys, I try to give advice, and I'm no seasoned vet or anything, but I try to take the lessons that I've learned through wrestling, whether they be good or bad, or things that I wish that I would have done that I think could have made a positive impact on where I am. I try to give younger guys warnings like, hey, do this or don't do this, and here's why. Or, like, don't sit still for too long, jump in cars, like, make sure you get, if you want to do this, you got to get your name out. Like, sitting still, Scott D'Amore is never going to show up to your home promotion and want to sign you, or Vince McMahon's never going to show up to your home promotion and want to sign you. So you have to get out and make a buzz. And I try to put that mindset into people. But yeah, I mean, I hope I've touched some lives along the way. So.
Well, you've definitely touched my life, and the lives of the people in the crowds that I go see shows at. And if anything, you've delivered on some tremendous potential this year. And like, okay, everybody knows the story. If you don't, and you're a new listener, I mean, the first time we saw Lord Crewe, he showed up returning from injury at FanFest, I think 2017. And we noticed immediately you look different than everyone else,
Yeah.
and you had kind of a different, just, I don't know, gravitas or whatever you want to call it than other people. And because of that, you stick out, no matter where you go.
Right.
What do you think, like, what do you look back on this year and you kind of nod with satisfaction, like, hey man, I fucking knocked that out of the park? Like, what are some proud moments from this past year?
I just think one of the things that I'm proudest about of this last year is that I just bet on myself, I guess. And I took a few chances, like I did a tryout for Impact, I did a tryout for Evolve. And I just feel like I'm, no matter what the results from those things were, like I still I'm proud that I did it, and I'm proud that I bet on myself to go there and at least give it a shot. Um, I can't complain about any of that. Also, just I'm proud with some of the matches that I've had. Like I was really proud of. I'm really proud with what I'm doing at Unsanctioned Pro. I really feel like that crowd has taken me in, and you know they're behind me, and every time I come through that curtain I get a great reaction up there, and then I think I feed off of that, and it has allowed me to have some really good matches at Unsanctioned, and I've been really happy with all of that. And then another good feeling that I have about this year is I've had a couple times I've had promoters reach out to me and ask if I wanted a spot on their show, where usually it's the other way around, like usually it's us sending messages, sending pictures and matches and getting left on red and all that good stuff. But this year I actually had a few promoters reach out to me, one of them being Derek from Unsanctioned. He was he listened to a couple of his fans that suggested giving me a try, and he did, and he's been a real pleasure to work with. He's very professional. I love the way he runs his show. Big Tom from War, he reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to come up and do a show, and he gave me a great match with Jake something that I was very proud of. So yeah, man, there's a lot this year that I've been proud of.
Okay, here's a nerdy wrestling question. So, you got your start at Northern Wrestling Federation, and Northern Wrestling Federation has a particular style where it's story over physicality, kind of in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And, so you see a lot less flippy shit, and it's a lot more straightforward wrestling, which people that know me know I'm a huge fan of that. That's what keeps me coming back over and over again. I'm rarely worried at NWF that one of my favorite wrestlers is going to break in half, but the indies are different. The super indies are a lot different.
Yeah.
And you've now had some experience working on some of these super indie shows. Like, how have you adjusted your style and, your like ability to take more risks? Because you certainly have, and you kind of have to get over on some of these shows. Like, how has that kind of worked out for you? And are you happy with the results?
Definitely. Like you said, the NWF is very like Memphis. Like you said, it's very storyline driven. A lot of like interaction with the crowd. That's what they do there, and I'm very fortunate to have been trained in that style, because not a lot of people anymore see value in that, if that makes sense. Like a lot of guys who a lot of guys who wrestle now just want to do crazy high spot, like see how many flips I can do in a match. And I mean, and that has its place. I'll never dog on someone's athleticism, because I can't do like the shit I see Alex Zane doing. I can't do that. I couldn't do that in my life. And I love Alex Zane to death. Shout out to Alex Zane. I can never ever do the shit he does. And because he's so good at it, that's afforded him a lot of opportunities. You talk about a guy who had a blowout 2019. Jesus. He's in Japan right now, over there with the OWE and the Strong Hearts guys and stuff. So like I said, he's killed it. But that's kind of going away from what I was talking about. I feel fortunate to have been trained in that old school Memphis style, because not everyone can do that now. Like, not everyone feels comfortable calling a match in the ring. I've done that a few times, and I'm fine with that. I've had a couple that I thought were really good that were just all called in the ring. And if you ask some guys to do that, they would go into a complete panic meltdown. But I feel like but I also, like you said, I do understand that the independent wrestling crowd of today is a little different. They do want to see some high spot stuff. They want to see some high risk things. So I felt like in order to get myself to where I wanted to be, I needed to figure out how to play that game as well. So when I started, actually, when I when I originally met Dave Christ, it was through a mutual friend at a concert. Like, it wasn't even at a wrestling function. Um, and he offered to, you know, bring me up and help train me a little bit and help me kind of, like he said, his words were, adapt to the indie style. So I went up and I started, getting some reps in with Dave at his school and starting to learn some different things. And that's kind of where I started working into Rockstar Pro. And I think working there has helped me get reps with people who do more of that style. And it's, and I don't know, I feel comfortable taking more risk with some of those guys because that's the style they're used to working. So I feel more comfortable from a safety standpoint of doing some of that stuff there. Um, but yeah, it's another thing too though, where if I've noticed here lately, a lot of it's wrestling, I think, is in kind of a shift again to where characters and storytelling is starting to take back over, if that makes sense. Like, you see guys like Warhorse and Danhausen and Orange Cassidy, like these guys with these really strong characters are the ones who are getting insanely over because of that. Like, it's showing people something aside from just high risk flippy stuff. And I think it's kind of a breath of fresh air for some people, along with the what the NWA is doing now with Power. It's a completely different format. It's old school wrestling, and I think that's a breath of fresh air to a lot of people who, like you, enjoy storyline based wrestling as opposed to just flashy high spot stuff. So I feel fortunate that I know both, and hopefully it'll land me somewhere where I fit in, I guess.
It's so crazy how the north and the south of Ohio are kind of, there's a dividing line somewhere between here and Dayton where wrestling changes and it becomes more southern. And I'm, obviously a huge fan of both styles. I like it all. I want to get into a little bit more of what we talked about up there at Unsanctioned Pro, or, as far as that place and everything. But just to make the point, just to talk about Danhausen real quick. I mean, obviously we've known about that guy for a real long time.
I
And
actually didn't meet Danhausen until just this last April.
really,
Yeah.
well, we met him like probably late 2017 or something like that.
Yeah.
He was just a dude in trunks up at Rockstar, and eventually he tagged with Pompano Joe, and they became Joe Hausen. And every once in a while, we used to just like we would see a guy, and we'd be like, this guy needs some motivation. He looks like he's got something, and we would just cheer the shit out of him for no reason whatsoever. And the crowd would just start to get behind him, and that kind of happened with Danhausen up there. But it's incredible. He has not changed his wrestling style, like, barely at all. And all he's done is created this character, and it makes so much of a difference. And there's so many guys out there that don't have a gimmick, that if they just had a gimmick, they'd be huge. And I think that's so important. There's a really big lesson to learn there. Now back to Unsanctioned Pro. I know I'm kind of going on a little tangent here, but I want to tell you something interesting. I was just hanging out with this guy, Travis Tubasang, who is the host of the Wrestle Special podcast. And, he's one of the guys that I met at Rockstar Pro during this kind of magic time in 2016-17, when they were just absolutely at the top of their game. And it was just, every week was just incredible. And that same magic, it's not the exact same, but it's the same kind of wrestling magic is now happening at this promotion in Columbus called Unsanctioned Pro. I know you've worked at a lot of different promotions, but can you tell me, like, what is the difference in the feel there versus, I don't know, like, other places you've worked?
I think it's that crowd. I mean, if I'm just being really honest, I think it is the crowd at Unsanctioned. I think it's almost like they all come together with like a similar mindset that, like, we're going to go here, we're going to get drunk and have a really good time, and we are going to just completely immerse ourselves in what we're watching. Because I have never wrestled in front of a crowd that is that into what we're doing. Um, it's really hard to explain, but there's just like a different energy in that crowd. And I've wrestled places where, it's really hard to get the reaction out of people that you're wanting, and sometimes it's a little frustrating, when things aren't going how you're hoping they would go. But I don't ever feel that way with unsanctioned. Like I said, I just think it's a crowd that really enjoys having a good time. And I mean, the crowd to me is just as important of a part of the show as anything else, because if we didn't have the crowd, we would just be wrestling and we'd be doing Lawler versus Funk in an empty arena. And what fun is that, like, but I don't know, man. Like I said, unsanctioned is quickly becoming one of my favorite places to work. And whenever, Derek books me for a show, I look forward to it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm already looking forward to January 19th. Like, I wrestle a lot, and to have like a specific date sticking out of my head that I'm excited about, that tells me something. You know what I mean? Like, usually it's week by week. Like, all right, what do I got this week? I'll look at my planner and, oh, okay, cool. But then, like, with this, like, I mean, I look forward to these shows because the crowd is just incredible.
Everybody does that goes to these shows. And like, what you said about the crowd being important, I don't think that can be understated. One of the things that wrestlers want, and you can see it in their eyes, it's very easy to see this communicated through, visual expression, is they want you to get hyped. They want you to boo. They want you to cheer. And so, some crowds don't do that very much. And, it's frustrating for the wrestlers who have to come out here and bust their ass for 10, 20 minutes, and they aren't getting that back from the audience. Now, there are situations where a crowd is tired or something like that from a real long, show or something like that. But that's one of the things that's awesome about unsanctioned pros. The crowd goes hard or harder than the wrestlers in the ring, right?
Yeah, seriously. And like you were just saying, sometimes a crowd will just not be engaged. And I so bad just want to pull the gladiator, like, are you not entertained?
Yeah, and it's that kind of situation's slightly dangerous too, because that, if somebody can't get a reaction from a crowd and they're doing all the right things, that sends them the wrong message. And then as a wrestler, they're thinking, oh, well, I need to do something different. Meanwhile, they're doing the right things, so it's really, I'm assuming that makes going over your match and kind of looking at the positive and negatives difficult when you have zero reaction from the crowd and it's not your fault. That also can be a booker's fault. Booking, these matches and putting storylines into it and stuff like that is important. And if that's not done properly, you get no reaction that way too, right?
Yeah, I think part of it also plays into knowing your audience, and I think that's important in a lot of aspects of life. Like, like even when it comes to like comedy and like telling jokes to your friends and stuff, like there's certain things that, like, might get over with certain people, might not get over with others. Like it's you got to know what the crowd that you're in front of wants to see, and that's usually, I try to get a feel on that. But like, if I'm at a new place, I usually will ask guys in the locker room, like, how's this crowd, like, what do they work, what works for this crowd, so that way I can try to figure out what I need to do in order to, give them the best possible showing that I can give. Whether, you know what I mean, like, whether that means, okay, this crowd really likes to be played with, so if you're a heel, make sure you're on this crowd. Because sometimes there are crowds that, like, I would say PTW is one of those crowds that if you're a heel, that crowd is gonna be on your ass, so you better be giving it back, or they're just gonna not care, and like, so it's very important to know your crowd and to play to your audience, I guess.
So in 2019, here are some of the matches that I think of when I think of Lord Crewe's 2019. And and what I liked about it. I think about the feud you had with Big Cuz at Northern Wrestling Federation that just produced some spectacular matches. I think about the whole dissolving of the Crimson Mafia and your, feud with Anthony Bryant. I think about your match with where you tagged with Aaron Williams in Unsanctioned Pro, your singles match versus PB Smooth, and this most recent match versus Casanova Valentine. What am I missing? Like, what are some things? Obviously, if you don't follow our show, we're not up at Unsanctioned or at Rockstar Pro that often. You did have a tremendous First Blood match with Aaron Williams up there that we saw. That was great.
Yeah.
What are some matches I'm missing here that were spectacular from this year, or maybe elaborate on why some of these matches were good?
Because I noticed that you mentioned three of the five you mentioned were unsanctioned. I just think it's, like I said, I think, that crowd makes my job so easy. And Derek gives me matches, honestly, that like I'm excited about. Like, because when he told me I was getting a match with Casanova, like my eyes lit up, and he was like, "See, that's why I do this." Is he saw the way I was like, "Hell yeah, I want to do that." And like, so when we're excited about stuff, it makes it a lot better because we're pumped on it. But as far as like some of the stuff that I think you might have missed, at Rockstar Pro, me and Austin Mannix did our Best of 7 series this year. And I think that was what really helped elevate both of us at Rockstar. Because, we were both just kind of, early on the show, like, just throw into whatever, opponents for guys who didn't have opponents. And after, we had a match on just a random Wednesday, and Jake Chris loved it so much he came off the commentary table and got in the ring and was like, "Yeah, I definitely need to see that again. So we're going to do that at the iPay-per-view." And then we killed it again at the iPay-per-view, and that's when he decided it was going to be a best of 7. I mean, we did a street fight, dog collar, boards, bar fight, knockout only. Like each match had a stipulation, and it allowed us to tell a different story. And I think each one of those matches had something really special to it. Mannix and I have a very similar style, so I think we mesh really well when we wrestle each other. So anytime I wrestle that dude, I feel like it's good. Me and Larry D had a really good one at Rockstar. I've wrestled Larry probably 10 times over the years, and we both were kind of in agreement that was the best one that we've had. That was for the AMP championship when I lost it to him. And I think another, I just had another one in my head too that I really liked. Oh yeah, in the midst of mine and Mannix's Best of 7, he was suspended for the Living in America pay-per-view, and Pompano Joe and I wrestled, and we opened the show, and we just had a killer match. Like I said, it was just a one-off, something to fill the time in between me and Mannix. But we were the first match on the card, and we were getting holy shit, this is awesome chants. I mean, and like the crowd was hot for that one, and I felt really good about that match. So I had a lot of really good ones this year, and I'm really excited to kind of see what I have in store for next year. So
Yeah, I famously or not famously said this year that I think that you are kind of on a tear, and you're at the top of your game. I mean, especially I think like late summer, early winter, you're just out here crushing it. Every single match is spectacular. And that's something that somebody like me who goes to 5 billion wrestling shows is very happy with, is when someone like you comes through the curtain and I'm getting to see you kind of grow and become a leader in the ring, and that's really important. Also, Pompano Joe, highly underrated. No matter how much we try to make him, this guy that everybody knows is a great wrestler, there's still assholes out there that think that he is not good, and I don't understand it. I mean, like, what's the guy got to do? I mean,
so good. Like, he consistently puts on really good matches, and he's very creative. Like, and I don't know how well that translates to the fans, but anyone who's shared a ring with him, we can all attest that Pomp is easily one of the most creative wrestlers that I've ever got to share a ring with, and he always has these really good ideas. Like, and that's another thing too, is Pomp is kind of a student of the game. So whenever he's at a show, he's always sitting and watching the monitor. He watches everyone's matches. And when you're done with your match, he'll come up and he'll say, "Hey, like, this was really cool, but I was watching it, and wouldn't you think this would be cool if, like, maybe you did it this way?" And 9 times out of 10, it's a freaking spectacular idea. And he's just, like I said, he just has a really good eye for things. And if you're having a match with him and he knows your shit, like, he knows, like, the stuff you do, he'll come up with really creative transitions and stuff. And like I said, yeah, Pomp, I think, is a very underrated wrestler, and he's one of my favorite people to share a ring with.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen probably 200, maybe more Pompano Joe matches, and I still to this day get excited when he comes out because I know it's going to be good every time.
Right.
All right. Well, we're going to kind of come to the end of this a little bit. Before we get to the end, we have to hear from our Indiana correspondent, Justin. He sent some questions along for you, and I'm hoping that you can shed some light on these because they don't make any sense to me, but apparently they will make sense to you. I don't know. We're going to find out.
Oh, good.
So you're all right. So the very first question is, why would you be in trouble if you go to Japan?
Oh, God. Well, because from what I have gathered, I've heard the ladies in Japan like tall, handsome white boys with tattoos. So I'd probably be in a bit of trouble if I went over there because I really have a thing for Asian ladies. So.
Aha. Okay. I gotcha.
That may have been a conversation that was had at one point. I don't know.
So how did that come up in conversation? Did Justin just, or Ralph just walk up and say, "Hey, Crewe, what kind of ladies do you like the most?"
Well, no, because they are not concerned with what kind of ladies I like. No, we were just talking about how, like, that is honestly, for me, that is like one of the biggest goals that I have in wrestling is I want to wrestle in Japan so freaking bad. And, like, for me, if I got to wrestle a match in Cork and Hall, I could hang it up tomorrow and be happy. You know what I mean? Like, that to me is like the biggest thing for right now that I could accomplish. And if I got to do that, then I feel like I could look back and be like, okay, everything that I've busted my ass for, this was worth it. So.
You know what's weird about Corrigan Hall is it's like the arena in Jeffersonville where there's like
really
a million.
It's Japanese Jeffersonville arena, but it's still though. It's like there's just no. To me, I think it's the Japanese Madison Square Garden.
Yeah. Well, you're right. Well, it's a little smaller, but it's legendary in that respect.
Yeah, it's legendary. It's I mean, it's like the ECW arena. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's just like it's that legendary venue in Japan that, like, so much great wrestling has happened in that building, and, like, it just, I just feel like walking in there, I would get goosebumps. And I'm kind of getting them just thinking about the possibility of that being a thing someday. And, like, I don't know. Like I said, that's my big goal because I've always wanted to travel to Japan, even just not as a wrestler. Like, I think Japanese culture is very interesting. And it's just always been somewhere that I've wanted to check out because I've not really traveled much outside of the U.S. I've been to Canada a couple times, but it's always been an in and out. So, like, I've always been very curious of, like, what this world has to offer, and I'd like to see it someday. And it would be really cool to do it as a wrestler.
No kidding. Yeah, it's always great when somebody pays you to see the world, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's basically what I'm getting at. I'd love to see the world on somebody else's dime. So,
all right. So the next and final question from Justin is, how does it feel to be gassed up when you're feeling low?
I can't express enough how much it feels to be gassed up by those boys. Anytime I post anything on my, like, Instagram story, I know I'm gonna get hard eyes or the fire emoji from Ralph and Justin. I know it's gonna happen, and sometimes I do it just to get that validation. Sometimes I'll just post a selfie on my story just because I know Ralph and Justin are gonna make me feel better about my day.
Well, that's pretty awesome, man.
They
Because
invited me to family Christmas,
no
but I have
kidding.
to dress up like Santa in that picture. And
That seems fair. I mean, it's again, maybe they'll pay you to come out, and then you can travel just like in the Midwest on their dime, I guess.
listen, straight up though, like all joking aside, Ralph and Justin, you two are my boys, and I cannot tell you how much I appreciate having you guys as fans and friends. Like, it's always a pleasure when I see you guys show up to stuff, and it's always a pleasant surprise. And just know that you boys have a special place in my heart.
So Merry Christmas to Justin and Ralph, and and everybody else out there, of course, too. Man, I've been really happy to get to know you as a person, as a wrestler, and all that stuff. I just, I'm really proud of you, and I can't wait to see what you do next. We're here to support you. You got, guys like Justin and Ralph out here to support you. You got sick kids in the hospital supporting you. When things get tough, you always got us. So, it's one of those things where I'm really happy to, play our role as a fan and support the people around us that we think are worth a shit. And my friend, you are certainly worth that. So, I hope you have the best Christmas ever. And, if it's not, I hope next year's the best Christmas ever. And just know that we'll be behind you in 2020. And I think, this is going to be a big year for you. What is, the goal for 2020 other than to just keep doing what you're doing?
I think the big goal for 2020 is I want to have a year like guys like the guys I mentioned earlier. I want 2020 to be my year to break out like, guys like Warhorse and Danhausen and them did this year. I want that to be my 2020. And I want to just hit the road. I want to be on the road every weekend. I want to be somewhere different. I want to be in front of new faces. I want to help, or I want to do what I can to get that buzz going, and just hopefully just continue to put on good matches and to continue giving the people what they pay for, so make sure they get their money's worth.
I think a big key for 2020 for you to focus on is continuing to show out at Unsanctioned Pro and any other place that's on that IWTV app, because that thing is a big deal now, and everybody's watching it. Even I'm watching it every once in a while, so it must be important. And it's one of those things where this is now like GCW and all these other promotions that don't really even have a name. They just are called Uncharted or something like that. These places are starting to blow up, and you're seeing that those talent rosters are starting to get rated by the other promotions. So I'm really hoping that Unsanctioned Pro can, slide into that same kind of situation now that they're on IWTV. That's pretty exciting, right?
Right, for sure. And that's like another thing too, is I am working really hard to, like I said, 2019, I think I planted a lot of seeds at places that I want to be. I've showed up, I've had my face seen, I've been in contact with people, and now it's just a matter of, I'm hoping 2020 will be the year that I get to harvest the crops, I guess. So, there are several places that I have on my radar. There's a place or two that I've been that I want to go back. I know that I really want to try to get back down to Supgraps in Nashville. That place is great. They have a fantastic crowd, and I think they're doing something really cool. I'd love to get out to Beyond. I know Drew's mentioned that he'd love to have me out to do one of those Uncharted Territory shows, that it's just a matter of logistics being all the way out in Boston. And then, I'd love to see myself at GCW. I'd love to see myself at Black Label Pro or AAW or somewhere up in Chicago, because I've never wrestled in Chicago, even though they have 47,000 promotions there.
That's ridiculous. I mean, you got Freelance, you got Freelance Underground, you got Berwyn, you got, AAW, you got a million of these places, Black Label Pro. I mean, there are a lot of them,
Never,
and
never wrestled in Chicago, and there's so many.
well, and a lot of them are really kind of highfalutin as far as like they're, they're kind of, your Black Label Pros, St. Louis Anarchy, AAW. Those are kind of your top promotions, in the Midwest, other than AIW and a few of the other ones. And I mean, there's so many great places to wrestle. Does that give you optimism? I was trying to wrap this up, but now this kind of opens up another idea here. The fact that there's so much wrestling and so much opportunity, does that give you optimism, or is that kind of frustrating because it's just kind of like, man, what do I do next with all these options?
Well, yes, and I mean, I guess it's a little bit of both, but definitely more optimism, because I think wrestling, and guys who have been around for a while can attest to this, but like wrestling right now is in the best shape it's been in a long time as far as guys making money and getting jobs places. Like WWE isn't the only place to go now. You know what I mean? There's different options where you can go make a good living. And I think because of that, the indies are on fire. And because everybody wants to see the next batch of guys that are going to go to TV before they go. So I've noticed that, indie crowds are up. The reaction and the participation of fans at indie shows are up. And it's almost got like a very punk rock feel to it in a lot of ways. And I think that's really cool. So, yeah, I think there's definitely more optimism than frustration, but I guess the frustration lies in the fact that there are so many guys that are, hunting for spots at these places, and, the place only has so many spots. So it's a matter of, I guess the frustration with me lies where I need to figure out how to show these promoters that I am worthy of one of these spots over somebody else. And I think that's the thing that I'm struggling with, but I think I'm starting to figure it out. So hopefully 2020 will be the year that I can prove that, as opposed to just talking about it.
Well, a big part of that, and I think that's part of your success at Unsanctioned Pro, is you came in with a built-in reaction. Maybe you didn't know you did, but you did. You came in, and the first time you showed up, people went nuts, right? And
Right.
so that's like, as opposed to, a couple years ago, you showed up at PTW, no one knew who the fuck you were, and you had to start from the bottom. And,
Right.
It's interesting how those, now you're an established guy, obviously at PTW, former champion, you're former Triple Crown or not?
I'm the only person to ever hold every title at PTW.
There you go. So, Triple Crown champion at PTW. So your character's well established there, and people will never forget it. In Unsanctioned Pro, you came in with that reaction already, and I think that's the key nowadays to getting over at a new place, is to kind of already have, through social media and through this IWTV app and stuff like that, to have a little bit of a built-in audience, because wrestling's a copycat thing, and so are the fans. And when we used to cheer for Danhausen back in the day, everyone else started cheering for him too, just because they wanted to be, cool and know the guy and everything. And that's kind of what the crowd wants, is they want to all cheer for the same guy. They want to all boo the same guy. So if you can come in with a little bit of that already, it spreads really easily.
Right.
That's awesome. Okay, man. Any questions for me?
Yeah, I do want to ask you a question. So who do you think on the indies right now is going to have a blowout 2020? Give me 3 guys.
Okay, so 3 guys on the indies. Well, I mean, at the top of my list, I hope this is the case. I really hope that Aaron Williams has a tremendous 2020.
Agreed.
Obviously, he deserves it. If Larry hadn't got signed already, he would be one of my guys that I would put up there. On kind of a smaller scale, like in Northern Wrestling Federation, I think Jimbo, the wrestler Jimbo, who just recently debuted, is going to have a huge 2020. Let's see here. Now, I'm just kind of getting into some of this, like, Black Label Pro and St. Louis Anarchy and a lot of these places. I mean, I think 2019 was the year of Mance Warner, and so, can't choose him anymore. Gosh. It's tough. There's a kid at IWA Mid-South that is really just spectacular and putting on match after match that is awesome. I think Trigga Travis is his name, and I think he's going to have a pretty big 2020. And then the other guy that's been floating around and honestly doesn't have much of a character, but he's so fucking good in ring that it just doesn't matter. And when he finally figures out that he needs a character, he's going to blow up. And I hope that's this year, and that's Blake Christian. So I think those are kind of a few guys. If I sat down and thought
Blake
more,
is so fucking good.
We saw a million matches this year, and one we only saw him a few times, and one that really sticks out is he had a match at the TPI versus Larry D that was just fucking, I mean, just unbelievable.
I've been in a car with Blake a couple times. Like I've rode out with him and Mercer to a couple GCW shows out in Jersey, and just getting to watch, as I didn't know who Blake was until I jumped in the car with him the first time. And I watched him do his thing at that first GCW show I went to, and holy shit, man, he's so good. Like,
it's great too because he's not just a flippy dude. I mean, we saw him in a couple story matches. We saw him versus Jordan Oliver at the Fight or Die show in a story match about an injury. We saw him with Larry D, which was a story match about, the way that match worked was that Larry just kept throwing him out and trying to get a count out victory, right? So Blake Christian was basically the underdog fighting from underneath, and he didn't, he used some of his flippy shit, but he told this amazing story as just a wrestler. And so, I'm really high on him just for that simple reason that he's shown me already that he can do, the flippy out of control style, but he can also tell the great story in the ring. So that makes me really think you're going to be something. And I'm sure I'm leaving other people out, but there's a million guys out there that could have a tremendous year this year.
Yeah,
All right, man. Well, we're going to wrap this up, and, Merry Christmas to everybody out there. Lord Crewe, where can folks find about your adventures in pro wrestling on the social medias, my friend?
On Twitter and Instagram, I am at Lord Crewe Kills, and then just search Lord Crewe on Facebook. But Twitter and Instagram are my two go-tos.
Yeah. You're a great follow. There's a lot of good stuff on there. And, you do get a little personal sometimes, which some of the guys shy away from. And I think that, showing the personal side of you is important because it gives people personal investment. And so I think you figured that part of social media out, that part's important. So, you're a great follow. You can follow the Road Home from Wrestling at the Road Home FW. You can follow me at Drusifer Tweets. And, for me and Lord Crewe, Merry Christmas to everybody, and thank you so much for listening.
Merry Christmas, you filthy animals.